All right, folks, welcome back. We are near the very end of First Samuel. I know this has kind of been quite an eventful story, but we are gearing up for next week, which is the last chapter of this book, which is basically the last episode where we'll see Saul and his family. And so today last week we had the rising action where we had both David defecting to the Philistines. We had Saul panicking as he's preparing for battle and seeking a witch to bring back Samuel so he can talk to Samuel. Didn't go well. And so now we flip back to David as the Philistines are getting ready for battle as well. So this is still rising action, rising action. This is bringing us to next week. So the question as we walk through our scriptures today that I want to keep in mind is, what is this story doing? Like, how is it positioning the characters? If you think about this as like pieces on a chessboard, we already see a few players or the first few moves being made. So when we're thinking about chess, what moves are being made that's going to play out next week?
Okay.
So with that in mind, let's jump in. So as I said, we flip back to David this week or for chapter 29. And the first thing that happens is the Philistines are gathering voices. And the Philistine officers evidently aren't too happy that David's still hanging around. So tell me what you think about this and kind of the officers and the Philistine leader and David all in the mix together. What's going on in this situation? What do you all think about it?
Well, it sounds as if the Philistine officers have a legitimate complaint. They tell him, look, we get into battle. How do we know he's not suddenly going to go back over to the Jewish side and start fighting us?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure too, there's part of their feeling is that we don't really want this superstar in our midst. We're just trying to manage as well as we can, and we're doing pretty well. But here you've got this person who's got some history of lording it over other people, and you've got him just like one of us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Also, the Philistine commanders, military generals, they were much more aware of the history of David as a general and as a military leader.
Mm.
I mean, that's the way I figured it was, that the king was a little naive in that area, and he listened to his people.
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah, we see the refrain that we saw earlier in the story when like David and Saul are riding into town after battle and the ladies are singing, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s, and his generals are going, that's the same David.
Right.
They're singing about this guy killing us. And
I do think Gary makes a really interesting point, is that the generals are more in touch with reality than the leader. And that may be a symptom of the way leadership goes sometimes, that the person on top kind of closes their eyes and does, the word naive, I think, is there. And so the other leaders, they know what's going on.
Well, that's their life. That's their game. So they're watching their competition.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Larry?
Somewhere there's a reference that the king tells David, you've been faithful to me for years. So it sounds like, there's been a considerable amount of period of time passed where David has served King, who was it, Amish or whoever it was. Well,
Mhm. Yeah. So this is not a short relationship, and it's not a simple dismissal. So when the king, or so we have the generals first coming forward and saying, like, we can't have this guy on our side.
mhm.
And the king is wise enough to know that one good fighter is not worth the defection of the rest of his army.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I do think that, like, if there is one person that's causing dissent in the ranks, you're preparing for battle, you can't afford dissent in the ranks. Send the guy away.
Okay.
Even if he's done nothing wrong in your eyes, I do think that was the right move for the Philistine leader or king. But the interesting thing is, what do you think about the way he does this? So he starts by saying, like, yeah, David, you've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And then goes on to say, rise, or I'm in verse 10 right now. Rise early in the morning, you and your servants, the servants of your Lord that came with you, and go to the place that I have appointed for you. As for the evil report, do not take it to heart, for you have done well before me. What comes to mind with this kind of dismissal?
Well, it really kind of it's a dismissal. Yes, go to the back of the line, but he's also given David a place for him. And the other thing is interesting is that the king says, I would love to have you, but it's the commanders who don't want you. Evidently there's some kind of personal relationship that is there, or at least Akish assumes it's there, and David pretends it's there. I don't know.
Well, David's been feeding him a bunch of disinformation
Right.
about all these battles and these tribes that he's been wiping out, which
right.
was a complete lie. He was not wiping out the Israelis.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I was going to ask, have they been killing any Israelis, any Hebrews?
David has not been. David has gone to regions and killed Israel's enemies, but saved the Israelites.
Okay, I see.
The interesting thing comes about, I didn't pick this up until I read the notes, which is in verse 8. Because David is a very careful speaker here, and there is a catch to what he says. So I want to see if you all can pick it up. What have you found in your servant from the day I entered your service until now, that I should not go and fight against the enemies of my Lord and King?
Oh,
I see some recognition. What are you all recognizing in that statement?
Well, he's lying, but he's sucking up to the.
See, I would argue he is not lying.
He is his Lord and King. He hasn't hurt the Israelites. Is that kind of what you're getting at? That there's a double meaning of my Lord and King. He doesn't mean Akish.
Right. Who is David's Lord and King?
Saul.
Saul, exactly.
Okay.
David's been doing exactly what he's been saying. He just never defined his terms. David is serving his Lord and King. It's just Akish thinks it's him, and David is serving Saul.
Okay.
Are there any descriptions of them actually going to war and David kind of disappearing when the Hebrews are there? Or?
So there's a few things that have been going on. So David has been serving as the king's bodyguard, which
Oh, yeah.
may
Okay.
put him in conflicts, but doesn't put him on the battlefield, typically.
Okay.
The other thing is that we discussed last time is David is being a raider or a mercenary. So he's going to towns,
Okay.
but it's not like a head-to-head battle.
Okay.
This I'll reference back to this when we get to chapter 30 because we can see the repercussions of him doing
Okay.
this.
Okay.
But he hasn't been going to a battlefield.
Okay.
Well, David doesn't really have very many men with him compared to Ashish, or however we pronounce it. He has lots and lots of lords and so forth.
Right. Which is, I think, why it's okay to pluck one of them off the chessboard. He has a bunch of like lords with their people. He can remove one pawn and it's going to be okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So notably, though, the other thing that is an interesting, or it plays into how the next chapter is going to play out. But when he's like, when Ashish says, "Go back to the place I appointed you," he's literally saying, "Go back into the land of the Philistines, to the plot of land I gave you. Go back home." He's telling him to go home. But notably, he is not sending him to the Israelites. He's not saying, "Go back
Mhm.
to he's not releasing him to the enemy side. He is saying, go back to the property I gave you closer to the coast.
Mhm.
So going back to the initial thing I set up, thinking about this like a chessboard and some initial moves being played. How are the pieces being arranged here with David on this like war game chessboard? What's happening here story-wise? What's going on?
It it the notes I saw said they're trying to set up make sure that it's clear that David didn't have anything to do with the death of Saul.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to place him someplace else.
Right. They're taking him off of the chessboard and giving
Yeah.
him an alibi, which is very important for the next king of Israel to have an alibi of why, even though he was living with the Philistines, he was not responsible.
It's a kind of an interesting aside. We talk about how long he had been there, and now I don't see it, but he lived there only 1 year and 4 months. I mean, yes, he had this relationship with Akish, but it's not really that long. And
Mhm. Right.
it's interesting that they note that. I think in 2 places.
Okay. I don't know where, like, I'm not doubting you. I just am curious where your reference is coming from.
Oh, 20,
David.
chapter 27.
Oh, 27.
So
Gotcha.
I'm back. I'm going back. I'm not
Okay,
not
no,
looking at the
I'm good.
start.
It was one of those, like, I wanted to, it's not
Yeah.
that I doubted you. I just wanted to know so I
No,
could,
that's okay.
yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
1 year, 4 months.
1 year, 4 months. All right.
27.
Mm-hmm. So,
I think that idea that David is being taken out of the picture of the battles between the Philistines and the Israelites, so that he's not part of that. There are other things that happen in this next chapter, but it's not on the main battlefield.
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
It's a good point, Sue.
So the other thing where I still think there is dynamics going on is, why does it matter how David is dismissed. Because we see there are some people unhappy with David. Why does it matter that he is honorably discharged by the leader off of the battlefield rather than like banished or dishonorably discharged? Why does that make a difference?
I think we're still building his character by saying he was so well respected by the king that he just let him go and thanked him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be the next king.
Hey, yeah.
Protect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is once again kind of preserving David's squeaky clean persona. That, oh, he worked for the enemy, and even the enemy thought he was a great guy. Like, he's, if you think of the difference between like him and think of Samson, for those who were with us when we talked about Samson. Samson was captured by the enemy and was cantankerous and rowdy and mean, and he was just mean. Like, yes, he was effective in some ways, but Samson wasn't a leader. He was just a guy with too much pent-up energy and destroyed a bunch of things. And so by contrast, we have David, who, like, everywhere he goes, everyone seems to love him. So I do think that that is kind of important to his image, is that even this other guy, even though he's not in the battle, we have a good reason he left. It's just he got honorably discharged so the king could save face. So any other thoughts here about this first chapter, about 29, kind of how the pieces are being set up, how people are preparing, and kind of all of the dynamics going on here?
Well, first, those two lines come up again. Saul has struck down his thousands and David is 10,000. So it's really building David up there again.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is now like the third or fourth time that we've seen that. So it definitely means this was a well-known phrase, this, or a lyric to a song. This is his reputation.
If this was written later to provide David an alibi, did they not know that Saul fell on his own sword or intended to?
So I think the implication is that they just wanted David away from the battlefield.
I see. Okay.
And the thing is, I'm not doubting that there is this is how do I want to say this? I'm not denying that David was removed for this battle, but it's still David needs an alibi. Because even if he didn't kill Saul, if he was a part of the efforts that led to his death,
right, okay,
there's still culpability and rumors could spread. That I think fighting the rumor mill is as important as did David actually put a knife in him himself. So that's more of the way I see this. And the part that is propaganda and the part that is history is we will never know in these stories. It's one of those that we look at this with both thoughts in hand. So let's jump and talk about the actual story that is given for David's alibi of what was he doing? He wasn't just sitting at home. He wasn't just twiddling his thumbs watching a battle happen, because the other thing is that also still puts culpability on David, because if he was just sitting there twiddling his thumbs while the enemy attacks his king, his lord and king, David still is basically implicated because he didn't try to stop it. So David is dismissed. He arrives at the property that King Ashish gave him, and what they find is that a raiding party has gone through. So if you put your finger here and flip back, we can where is it? Chapter 27, verse 8. I'm just gonna read it real quick to you. This is when he is being a raider. He's just going around attacking the enemies of Israel. Now David and his men went up and made raids on the Gerishites, the Gishurites, and the Amalekites. So David has recently gone to the Amalekites, raided them, took their stuff, and left and brought their stuff back home. And lo and behold, when David leaves his property, the Amalekites come right back.
Even though they were all wiped out to the very last one.
They were not, but yes. So just a quick jogging of your all's memory. The Amalekites are the long-standing enemy of Israel. But most notably, the Amalekites are the descendants of Esau, notable twin brother of Jacob and Esau. Esau is the brother who never does anything right. He gets his birthright stolen from him, and then he goes off and he is like the ancestor of the Amalekite tribe. But the Amalekites also attacked the Israelites when they were in the wilderness, when they were wandering after leaving Egypt. So this is one of the Israelites kind of understand that these people are vaguely related to us, but they're also our enemy. And so David comes back and hears that the Amalekites that he just attacked him and kidnapped his wives. We are told that they didn't kill anyone, they just took everything. So what do you think about this, both as a story of David, but also as kind of an alibi of where he was when this battle is about to take place?
It's a pretty good one to go rescue. Yeah. Yeah. Very convenient. Nobody was hurt.
How convenient. Was it the church lady who used to say that? How convenient.
There's a lot of that.
Well.
So in developing this alibi, I take it the Amalekites were around for a long time. He had not wiped them out earlier.
So correct. The Amalekites. So there's two, how do I say this? The Amalekites get used in kind of two different ways. So the Amalekites can be seen as this regional group. Let me see if I have a map that I've already downloaded that can help us talk about this. So the Amalekites are they are a loose group of people where they are herders, or they are raiders, they are nomadic people. If you remember the thing that is told to, what's this one? That is told to Esau when he's banished, is that he is going to be a wild ass of a man, and that he's never really going to settle down, and he's going to wander the desert. And that's what the Amalekites continue to do. They are, there we go. All right, this one will have to work. Here we go. So this is also kind of at the time where we are dealing with anyways. Ziklag is one of the places where they're setting up. So the Amalek region is all of this, but down through the Sinai Peninsula. So the region of this like group of nomadic raiding parties, they're not organized. They don't have a king. They don't really have a leadership structure. It's kind of this title given to a series of nomadic people. So David could have very well wiped out a group of Amalekites,
Right.
but the idea that he wiped out this nomadic culture is different.
Okay.
So there's kind of that dual level of he probably went down here and wiped out a group of Amalekites, but you would have needed like an extermination effort by a major empire to wipe out the Amalekite culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
You know, 2/3 of the population might have been out of the village and Rome, yeah, and raiding parties and everything. So I can see how they could reform.
right. And this is not a group of people that is like they're not setting up stone buildings or earthen buildings. These are people who are living in tents. This is why there seems to be an acknowledgement of Israelites and Amalekites having shared lineage, is because if you remember how the Israelites were living when they were wandering in the desert, that's kind of how the Amalekites just always lived. And so if you want to take like this is more of trying of the viewpoint of people trying to see what, not trusting the Bible as an accurate description of history, but kind of looking at it with a more critical lens. I could see how it could be argued that the Amalekites and the Israelites were actually sibling nomadic tribes, and it's just the Israelites took over a place and settled down where the Amalekites didn't. Because there does seem, that's more, or Gretchen, you've talked about this before when we are in the book of Joshua and Judges, that there is a way to understand Israelite history, that it wasn't a full-in invasion, like is often described in the Bible, that the Israelites came out of Egypt, wandered for 40 years, and then they entered the promised land and just killed everyone and replaced them. That's probably unlikely. And so what probably happened is there was a group of people that came to this area. They probably took over some places and they probably did kill a lot of people, but they more integrated with a Canaanite culture. And we see that's probably why it was so hard to beat out polytheism and these other gods, is because some group that had a relationship with the Amalekites seems to have integrated into this area. So even, I'm gonna bring the map back real quick. We see Moab and Edom here, and if we go back to the stories of Genesis, this is why Genesis becomes so foundational in a way, is because I forgot who the Edomites are. The Edomites and the Moabites are both once again descended from the Abrahamic family. We have they have ancestors that they know there's this long-standing ancient connection, even though these are ongoing enemies. So this is almost seen as like these are all siblings, or maybe more like cousins of tribal groups that are arguing over the same space because the land's not hospitable to anyone. And so they all know that they're kind of related. And when they get along, they will exchange children in marriage all the time. But when things fight, they knock heads because sometimes families fight the worst. So all of these groups are kind of related. The exception is the Philistines are not from this region. We know they came from the sea. So all of the things from the south are kind of related in like a cousin way. The ones to the north are a different people group, and everyone that comes from the west is more Greek or Northern African in origin. So Anyways, that's a long explanation for a simple question of who are the Amalekites? Just doing a quick refresher and bringing some others back up to speed. Any questions on who the Amalekites are?
No. It seems like they wanted to make a point that it wasn't the Philistines that did this. If it had been the Philistines, they would have killed everybody.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's the 2 points of this, that the Philistines don't attack David. They don't like David, but they didn't attack him. But David also takes this as a chance to go attack someone who is an enemy of Israel. So even while he's not helping Israel with the Philistine battle, he is helping Israel with the Amalekite issue. Yeah. All right. So the other thing that is interesting is this seems to be an ongoing back and forth retaliation, tit for tat. I steal your stuff, you steal my stuff. What do you think about this? David is positioned as the victim in this story. Is David actually the victim in this story, or is he the aggressor?
Well, he's the one who moved into the area. So I don't know if you can call that being an aggressor, but he certainly is the new person.
But
he's just recovering what is his.
Yeah.
But how did he get what is his? That's my question.
He killed people, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he killed people, but he didn't. And he took all their stuff, and then he very generously shared it with the guys that had stayed back.
So this is sometimes the struggle when looking at conflicts, is if you don't look at what led up to it, you may have a different conclusion on who is actually the aggressor and who is the victim. So if you flip back to 27, which verses 8 and 9, what we see is David attacked the Amalekites unprovoked. The Amalekites did nothing to him. He went into their territory, attacked the Amalekites. And it says, David struck down the land, leaving neither man nor woman alive, took away their sheep, oxen, donkey, camels, clothing, and came back. David had no sheep. David had no oxen of his own until he went around killing and stealing. All of his property is stolen property. And now we see that the Amalekites, not that if we trust the story, he killed all the Amalekites in the area he attacked, but probably the relations, the other people in other wandering bands that were related to those folks who noticed that their relatives were killed and all of their stuff is stolen, found out it was David. They came, they didn't kill anyone, they just took the women and children and the sheep and the oxen. And then David went, killed everyone, and took his stuff back. How does it sound in that reframing of the story?
Well, Yahweh always wants that to happen, to kill everybody, doesn't it? Isn't that the instruction from God?
That is their interpretation of God's word.
I
will always put it out there. That is what the people felt that God was telling them to do.
There's a couple of people have gotten in trouble for, like Saul got in trouble because he didn't do that. So
that is correct.
Yeah, he didn't kill the king. Anyway.
Was it? Wait.
Yeah, but one of the reasons we can sort of accept this sort of thing is the feeling that, well, that's the way things were done in those days. You know, you had a war, you slaughtered everybody, you didn't just kill the people, you killed their dogs and cats and all their other animals. And now all of a sudden, here you say the Amalekites come in, they burn down a city, and they don't kill anybody.
It's interesting.
Yeah, who feels more moral in this story? I mean, granted, David went in. He didn't. Yeah, Gary, go on.
Somebody in this conversation said that this was all written as an alibi. So why does it have to all have to fit together logically?
It doesn't. I think it doesn't. I pull it out because I do think that this has implications in modern understandings. Sometimes we see tit for tat battles, and if you're not looking at the longer history of who started the tit for tat and who kind of was how did it progress over time, we can have a misunderstanding of who is the actual aggressor in situations. So it's more of a moral argument and less of like I've said, this part of scripture plays fast and loose with the details.
Yeah. And I suppose you could say, after all, they've got two of David's wives in captivity. So, of course, this is a good reason for him to go and attack them and try to get his wives back as well as his donkeys.
As well as
Yeah, David wanted his property back.
right.
But it is go for it.
I was just going to say it is interesting that the Amalekites did not kill but took, because that meant that they were then responsible for the lives of all those people. I mean, depending on how many there are, but that put a strain on their resources. But of course, they took the sheep as well. I mean, they took everything, but we would say that's a nicer thing to do than killing everybody.
Than killing.
It's a game.
Would you rather be killed or enslaved?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is, in my opinion, like a fascinating cross-section of, in some ways, it's meant to make David look good, but it also hinges on the fact that we're not supposed to think of the Amalekites as human in the same way that the Israelites are given humanity. So we've referenced before that King Saul, one of the way that the kingdom was ripped from him is he went to battle, he killed everyone, men, women, and children, but he saved the donkeys and the sheep because he wanted the spoils of war, and he didn't kill the king. That was also the Amalekites. This is once again that same group of people where Saul beheaded their king and kept their sheep, and that's the one where then Solomon was like, oh, you didn't kill the king, now I will, shroomp, and he's dead. So we are really not supposed to empathize with the Amalekites. And I'm curious how that makes you feel, kind of being told that, no, don't pay attention to this group of people, don't really think about their humanity, and their morality doesn't matter.
Well, they are sort of cousins.
They are.
Did the Israelites think of them as cousins, as related?
So,
because they helped them. Let's say, does it say he helped them? They helped them in Egypt.
Oh, so there was an Egyptian that was enslaved.
Okay.
So there is an understanding that these are a related people group because of the preserved stories about Jacob and Esau. And Esau, that's why I went back and said, hey, Esau is the ancestor to the Amalekites. It matters that like these people know they have a shared heritage. I mean, it might be in a not dissimilar way to the fact that like I'm trying to think of an example. The only thing coming to mind is like the UK, like there's many groups that are like in that area, and they all know that they have shared heritage-ish compared to the rest of the world. Like, but they also are at each other's necks. Like the Irish don't get along with the English, and then the Scots are don't like anyone. But they all have a shared history, and yet they have often been contentious with each other. But when you look at the globe, it seems almost it's kind of fascinating that these two islands bicker amongst themselves constantly when you see they have far more similarities between them and like countries half a world away from them. So I would say these groups are actually more closely related than the English and Irish are.
You know, I liked your the tit for tat. It just reminds us of the stories of the Bible continue to be lived today in very uncomfortable ways, if you really look at it. And you know how people are sometimes kind of worship the Bible. You know, they say, oh, everything is, well, really, it kind of shows that we really haven't been all that. If you want a reason for confession, I mean, we're part of this. We wipe everybody out. And we continue to do that. Kind of gets under your nerves. Why don't we ever learn?
Well, you know, for a long time during the Second World War, people took prisoners. I don't think they're doing so much of that now. I think they're just killing people.
There are some Ukrainians, I think, that have been prisoners of war, but that is a very interesting point. And of course, well, I'm not going to talk about the Middle East as today, but just to say that there is an example of tit for tat.
Yeah, it is tit for tat.
Taken to the ultimate. You know, whoa.
And I noticed on Chris's map that Gaza is right down there in this area that David is in.
It's where the Philistines are. That strip.
That's right.
So thank you all for going into, like, this is not an easy discussion to have, and I'm always impressed with our ability to talk about difficult things, especially when it does seem that some of these things are still happening today, which is wild, because this is, I mean, not just like 2000, but more like 3,000, 3 or 4,000 years ago, and yet we can't seem to figure some of this out. But I would also be remiss with the last 15 minutes if I didn't talk about the second half of chapter 30, because there's more politicking going on. And Sue, you've already mentioned this, is he took the spoils from the Amalekites, and he didn't just keep them this time. So what did he do with his spoils of his second raid on the Amalekites?
Well,
he shares.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, Sue, what were you gonna say?
Me?
Yeah, I heard you start talking.
I thought I was interrupting somebody. He shares the spoils with the 200 or 2,000 men that stayed put, and they made a rule that would happen forever. I don't know if that's happened forever, but it says until this day, that is the way they do things. Because not everybody can fight. Somebody has to take care of things at home. So,
and
yeah.
Oh, he gives he sends spoils over to Judah to his old
Yeah.
buddies, or who he's hoping will be his buddies in the future. I
Mhm.
mean, you know,
Mhm.
there were a lot of spoils, weren't there?
So yeah, there's the two-tiered system here where David is rewarding his soldiers, even the ones who stayed behind because they were tired. And I do think that this is an honorable thing to do. It's like, if you're tired, don't get yourself killed, stay. But he says that there is not dishonor by doing that. Literally,
Mhm.
the for those who for the share of the one who goes down to battle shall be the same as the one who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike.
Mhm.
So why is this a good idea as a military leader?
Well, somebody has to protect it.
It keeps the morale up because shares in the winnings.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes them look good, except to the people who fought.
And it kind of evens out them, so
Mhm.
we're all
Yeah.
together in this.
Mhm.
Gosh,
still-
we're just buddies.
Yeah,
That's
the people he's
socialism.
leading are kind of sort of the bottom of the barrel, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. I also have to think that this kind of like taps down a little bit of bravado, that it's like, I don't want you doing stupid things. Like, I don't want you going just because you think you're gonna get more in the end. Like, let's actually
yeah.
be strategic. And we do need some people to stay behind in order to be strategic. So,
Well, you know,
yeah.
it's similar when a sports team wins. It's not just the first string that gets the credits, the team.
Mhm. Mhm.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
a great translation, or like a modern idea behind it. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I've very much known people who are actually terrible at the sport they play, but they are a great team member because they keep morale high. And so it's one of those that sometimes having a bad player helps if they help encourage other people to do their best.
Mhm.
Sometimes see the equipment manager being celebrated.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
From a day-to-day standpoint, he or
Mhm.
she can mean a lot in the spirit of the team.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we see on one hand, David's earning the respect of his men. I would think that this would earn him a fair amount of loyalty with the men who felt protected because
Mhm.
he said no to the men, or to certain men, which in the
Mhm.
past we've seen Saul kind of be afraid of his military people. When we talked about when he went to the Amalekites and he didn't kill the sheep like God said, Saul's answer was, well, my men would have revolted if I had killed everything and they got no spoils. Here we see David instead standing up to his military men and kind of taking the authority and saying, no, that's a terrible idea. We're
Mhm.
not going to do that.
Mhm.
So we're
Mhm.
starting to see the contrast between Saul and David show up.
Mhm.
But then there's the second part where he also sends things to Judah. So why is he doing this? Why is he sending gifts forward to people? I believe these are all the locations that have sheltered him when he was on the run beforehand.
Mhm.
Why do this?
He's looking forward to his future.
Right.
Mm. Yeah, say more. How does this set him up for the future?
Well, he's been rejected by the Philistines because he's Jewish, so he's decided, hey, I'd better get that force behind me. I'm obviously not going to convert the Philistines to helping me. I'm going to have to go back to my roots, and that's going to be my source of power from now on.
So he's kind of looking a few chess moves ahead and saying, okay, this is no longer a permanent situation. Let's
Right.
set up the next situation.
Yes. Yes.
Other thoughts on what he's doing?
Well, it's a thank you for those who did support him when he needed support,
Mhm.
especially from Saul trying to kill him.
Mhm. So
The
he's rewarded.
thank yous are there to build up goodwill.
Right.
The goodwill of these people.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And also show how good he is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He knows Saul isn't going to be around forever.
Well, Saul has gotten his walking orders for the second time.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I guess David knows he's going to inherit the kingship. Huh?
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, even Saul told him that.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
when he was so noble and he didn't kill Saul, didn't lay a hand on him.
So I'm wondering if David is starting to see the chessboard as it's laying out, where I mean he was sent away from the battle because the Philistines are marching on Israel,
Mhm.
and Israel's preparing for battle. And I am wondering if David kind of has a sense of, oh, is this it?
Mhm.
Is this? I don't know, but David probably knows there's a chance that Saul's not going to walk out of this one.
Mhm.
And so I do think, as you all have been saying, he is setting up gracious favors in advance.
Mhm.
While saying thank you is great, it's
Mhm.
also really good to have people who support you when you're going to sweep in.
Mhm.
Because remember, David's been on the run.
Mhm.
There are while we see this story from David's perspective largely, there's probably military leaders who would love to ascend to the throne. There are other people who could sweep in, and we know Samuel is dead. Samuel, the one who could attest to the fact that David's already been anointed, he's gone.
Mhm.
So the audacity of David to think he can walk in is actually pretty darn high. So he's kind of
Yeah.
trying to grease some wheels
No.
so he can just ascend to the throne when it's time.
It's a great PR move. I mean,
Yeah.
Right?
he goes to the elders of all these cities and he gives them these gifts, and they're
Couple
not
of sheep.
they're not going to forget it.
Oh,
Well, thank you. Giving gifts is a way of also making people behold to you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not always a noble thing to be giving gifts.
I believe an illegal gift is also called a bribe.
Oh, yeah, that.
So the line between David saying thank you and David bribing these people is once again very thin. David is morally gray. So what do you all think of the chessboard that's been set up between 2 weeks ago and this week? What do you think about the situation that's about to unfold? How are things looking? What do you expect to happen? I mean, I think you already if you get a sense of things, we already kind of know what's going to happen next week. But what do you think, just given the story and what we've talked about, how are things looking?
I think is on his way to be king.
Mhm.
And
But
it's time
I
for
don't
Saul.
remember which. I read the last chapter, but I don't remember who attacked. Oh, it was the Philistines. Okay.
Oh, those old Philistines.
Okay.
Yeah. B, what were you gonna say?
It's time for Saul to get out of the picture.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's certainly taking his time.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a little bit away from the thread of this story, but um, David went to the Lord to get information and support on his battle, and yet he was not reprimanded for not sacrificing and setting something aside for the Lord after the battle.
Oh,
I know that's distracting from the way we were going with the story, but it seems that the Lord's got a different approach to David.
You are correct in observing that David doesn't follow the same rules when it comes to the Amalekites that the kingdom was torn away from him because he didn't follow. I do think if we go back and compare the two stories, my guesses are there is going to be a difference. And if my memory serves me correctly, and I am willing to be wrong on this one, I believe Saul was told beforehand to decimate everything, and David is not. But it still is interesting that Saul is given that command and David isn't.
Yeah, okay.
So there are
right.
I do think it's still interesting to see that these two men are being treated differently by God in this story, in these stories, that they do seem to have a different set of rules.
The Lord's not micromanaging so much.
Mm-hmm.
And after all, the Amalekites did have David's two wives. I don't think they had anything Saul's other than maybe a few sheep,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other final thoughts for today for this story?
Well, I'm anxious to read 31.
Fair enough. All right. Before we pray out, I do have a little bit of housekeeping to talk with you all just to get a sense of where we want to go. The schedule for the Bible study ends next week. I have after Easter, I'm taking some study leave. So Clay, was that? Oh, okay. I was just, gotcha. What I want to know is we've been following this thread of the story since Genesis, and I keep checking in saying, do we want to keep going? Next week is the last week where we are in 1 Samuel. Do we want to continue into 2 Samuel, which continues David's story? So we get a lot of the famous David story, the second half of the famous David stories in 2 Samuel. We also get Solomon's reign. Let's see, how long is 2 Samuel? All right, so 2 Samuel is decently long. It is
pretty long.
24 chapters. And what I can do, if you all would rather, some books where I don't do every single little story, but I kind of hit some of the high points.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Because if you all
I think, yeah.
kind of, all right, if you all want kind of the overall arc of kind of how the kingdom or the story of Israel goes from Genesis, the creation of the world, the Abrahamic family, the exile, and then into exile. 2 Kings ends with the destruction of Israel by the Babylonians. There is a lot in 1 Kings and 2 Kings that is very tedious. But if you want me to kind of skip stones from story to story, I am happy to kind of pull up the story
And he did everything
narrative.
that was right, and he did everything that was wrong. I mean, really. But so what is your suggestion, Chris, that we continue with the David story, or that we move on to the exile?
Oh, what I was going to say is I can see if I can schedule from, and I kind of want to see if I can like close it out by December, and then by December we can do a hard shift to another subject and another kind of genre of the Bible. But if you all are willing or interested in kind of having that continuity of finishing out the story to the exile, I can see if I can try to squeeze it in that window and kind of skip stones through the rest of the
Yeah,
history books.
that sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
'Cause
we got David this far. We better get him to the end.
I was thinking you didn't want to give up on David yet. And
Yeah,
Solomon is
right.
also equally interesting. I wanted to know how you wanted to treat kind of after David and Solomon, because that's when things get boring.
It gets weird. But
Yeah.
Well, are we, I mean, is there, after David and Solomon,
Mhm.
Are they, when does God stop telling them to kill people all the time? Is there, I mean, when do they begin to change their view of Yahweh?
Yeah.
Does that happen?
I would say, so there is why I talk about people's interpretation of what God says is
Yes, I know,
because,
interpretation, yeah.
there can be conflicting ideas about what God is saying. So when you hit First and Second Kings, that's when the prophets, so think your Isaiah, think your Jeremiah,
yeah.
those are actually running in tandem at the same time. They run parallel. And what the history portion of the Bible says, or that the royal logs, I don't want to call it history because I don't think that does its justice, but the royal log of what happened. And the prophets don't have the same theology of what God is telling them to do. They often are butting heads about what's going on and they don't agree. So it's when the prophets come around really starts to be where the narrative has a very different perspective on it. So it'll take a much more work, but when there is kind of like we didn't talk about the Psalms today, but kind of how I had the David story and a few Psalms to go with it just to get a flavor. I can see if I can pull out some of the prophetic literature when it does run in tandem with the kind of courtly narrative.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, Clay?
I just wanted to comment for others who maybe haven't been with us since the beginning of this. There was another time that Chris did this and just sort of hop skipped and picked out certain things for us and certain stories for us that got us through a huge section of, I think it was Deuteronomy and all of those. And it was really a great way to do that. Just leave it up to her to guide us through it. And like I said, kind of hop, skip, and jump and get through it. And then just one other comment. We had started out originally, January of 22 with Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
But we had one person who did not want to continue in the New Testament. So we just went back and started Genesis partway through the year and have just continued it all the way through. And I think it would be great to finish all this up and then decide where do we all want to go next? Do we want to go back to the New Testament? Do we want to do Revelations? I mean, what do we want to do as a group? Actually, that would be fascinating. I'd love it.
I would love a genre change.
But have Chris get us through. Yeah, have Chris get us through the rest of it.
Read all the other stuff like Gospel of Thomas or something like that.
Right, and some more unique ones that aren't in, Maccabees. I mean,
I don't have it. I've already read it, so I don't need to be doing that. But I just thought it'd be interesting.
Okay, that's all right. That's all helpful. I'm hearing no dissension with kind of let's finish the narrative, which frankly is a grand arcing narrative. If we kind of jumped, if you want to go back, all of the studies are on that YouTube study, or it's the Bible study I have a playlist that has over 200 videos now that starts in Genesis, and you can watch them through. And so I feel like ending in Second Kings kind of caps that narrative, and then yeah, we can decide where we want to go. Gretchen, what did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say that I just think it's essential that we kind of understand the exile and that we lead up to it and kind of, I think people don't realize what important part of the Bible it is, that the exile then is kind of a turning point that continues to this day.
So that actually gives me an idea, and once again, I've done this before often with trying to get big topics under our belt is kind of, if we want to end on a presentation that's not biblically, or I mean, it is not a Bible study, it's more of a presentation on the effect, or like what happened in the exile, and kind of more of a lecture on what changed and kind of how that sets up the situation for the Gospels.
Yeah, that's what I'm really interested in that. Yeah.
Okay.
Me too.
Because I talk about the exile a lot, and it's because it is so foundational to both why Christianity is the way it is, but also how the Jewish culture changed.
Yeah.
In a very
it
foundational
had to have
way.
changed, yeah. Because Jesus came out of it, and there must have been ideas floating around that were similar to his.
Oh yeah, we kind of absorbed the Babylonian religion. That's the most fascinating part to me, is that all of this, we kind of just took Zoroastrianism and we're like, great ideas, thanks. And like walked away with them. So
Chris, I think you hear that we trust you to come up with something that will keep us here on Tuesday morning and keep us reading and learning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your trust. You do give me ideas though in these little chats, so it is helpful for me to hear from you all. All right. Lovely. Well, I'll put that together today to have in the notes. But shall we pray ourselves out? All right. Let us pray. Loving God, it is remarkable sometimes to read the arc of a narrative that is centuries long. It is not always the understanding we know of you, but it is interesting to see your steady presence throughout all of this that continues through these ancient stories to our lives today. And it gives us comfort that when there is conflict and strife in our own world, that you're not abandoning us, you're not leaving us, just like you did not leave the people in these stories, even when they are lost and trying to find their way back. So help guide us in these times. Help us look to you and your wisdom and your discernment of how we move forward and how we build the ideas that you've set forth in our world today. So be with us, guide us, and bring us back together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris,
Thank you.
That was great.
Of course.
It's always great. Yeah.
Chris
Have a
and
good week,
Gretchen,
everybody.
I just wondered if
Yes.
Chris and Gretchen could stay on for a moment. I wanted to talk about spiritualism.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.